Welcome to episode 81 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is Jamie Benning here talking to you from my home in outer London. It's officially the summer holidays. The kids are off school, which means, amongst other things, it's harder to work on my projects like this very podcast. If this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, the remit is all about preserving film history. You can treat this and the 80 episodes that came before it as an archive of film history that can be used to listen to for your fun and entertainment, or as research material for your book or podcast or even essay. I just want to have an archive of conversations with these amazing group of people and artists that worked on these movies that I love so much. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and you are very welcome here. If you're a regular listener, thanks as always for joining me and also for your support. Thank you to the just over 100 people of you that support the podcast via patreon.com/Jamie Benning. If you can spare just $12, you can support the podcast for an entire year. That's 24 or more episodes, because I do extras now and again. So if you're in America, that's just 50 cents per episode. And I call that a bargain. And it really would help me focus my time and resources on the podcast. There are several tiers to choose from on the Patreon page with several different perks, including videos and merchandise. You can also support the podcast by buying some merch at filmumentaries.creator-spring.com. I'll add that in the show notes. That includes t-shirts, bags, bottles, and even socks. Cozy. I'll leave the links for the Patreon and the shop in the show notes, as I said. You can also find me on Twitter at JamieSWB, and on my profile there's a link tree to all the various sites I have, including my Vimeo channel, where you'll find hours of videos for you to watch, all for free, on films like Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future. There's probably some I'm forgetting, and some of my shorter form documentaries on there as well, as I said, all for free, so get them while you can. Okay, so for this episode, the second one of July 2023, I spoke with puppet film director and creature effects artist Kevin McTurk. Kevin and I first connected on Facebook a couple of years ago, maybe even more years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago. We've been trying to find a suitable time to have him on the podcast since then, and well, now is the time, because Kevin has a project on Kickstarter as we speak. So Kevin directs these amazing short films using puppetry and wonderfully atmospheric effects and amazing voice artists. He's also a veteran of creature effects in movies like Batman Returns, Jurassic Park, Galaxy Quest, and King Kong. But he's also this director of these amazing short films, as I said. He started with the Narrative of Victor Karloch, a Victorian ghost story. Then there was The Mill at Caulder's End, which was in the similar genre, similar vein. The one that I first spotted was his third film, The Haunted Swordsman. It's quite extraordinary. I didn't know what I was looking at originally. You'll hear us talk about that in the interview. Kevin's latest, which is, as I said, currently on Kickstarter, is called Grylu Sker, but it's spelled Grylusker, because it's an Icelandic folklore story. And as of today, as I'm recording this, 25th of July, it has 18 days to go, and I'm pleased to see that it's nearly 75% funded. So do check it out. As I said, it's spelled Grylu space Sker. See if you can help push it over the line and get it fully funded. During the interview, Kevin's connection went down a few times, so when I was editing the podcast, I got back in touch with Kevin to help me fill in the gaps. So you'll hear me a couple of times interjecting into the conversation, just clarifying what Kevin was saying. I didn't want to lose the recording. We didn't have time to re-record a conversation, but I didn't want to lose the essence of what he was saying. Shouldn't be too distracting. I'll just pop in a couple of times to tell you what chunk was missing. So here's my interview with puppet film director and creature effects artist Kevin McTurk, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on.
I wanted to thank you so much for creating your podcast. When I came across it, it harkened back to Cinefex and Cinefantastique and all the magazines I grew up on. And I just you're doing such a wonderful service. And you've interviewed the titans and of the effects world, Ken Ralston, Dennis Muren, and so many others. And I feel like I'm just such a small cog in the effects world, and just a real behind the scenes person. But I'm honored that I can speak to you today.
You know, listen, I'm happy to have the Titans on there. I'm happy to have anybody that's involved in the industry whose work I admire. And, you know, when we connected on Facebook and you showed me your short films and I look back at the films that you worked on over the years, the big films, I just thought, you know, I've got to speak to this guy because what you're doing shows that you have a passion for what you do. And that's what really, you know, encourages me to talk to people like you. I just want to hear that, you know, that passion, that interest, because you sound like as much of a fan as we are on the other side. So would you say that was true?
I really do. The whole reason to make these short films is just it's sort of a bucket list of like favorite shots that I would love to see, sequences. We all grew up going through the ILM books, and this is sort of like all these dream shots. Like I'd love to do a cloud tank shot, or I'd love to do miniatures, or stop motion, or any kind of physical effects and creature effects. And so I've worked on a lot of films as a builder, and this was my chance to kind of return to my filmmaking roots and yeah, try to pull off these shots.
Yeah, I want to get into those films a little bit later on in our conversation. What I want to know is where it began for you. Like, what was the starting point? A lot of the people I speak to, you know, like we spoke briefly before we started recording. You know, you mentioned I'd spoken to Ken Ralston and Dennis Muren and people like that. They have very similar origin stories. You know, it was the Super 8 era. It was Cine Fantastique. What was it for you that sparked your imagination?
This were definitely it. I would say that the three magazines I looked over were Cine Fantastique, Cinefex, and Cinemagic. And Cinemagic was just a guide for how to do effects for Super 8 films. And then I have a book,
Huh.
Film Magic, and you can see that I've this has
It's
seen a
been
lot of
loved.
love. Yes, over the years. This was one, and it's written by so many luminaries. I mean, there's uh, there's a Craig Reardon article in here,
Nice.
and even if I wasn't making a film, I would be just reading this on summer vacations and things like that. So um, this was very pivotal in my education. And then what happened was I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, born and raised, and it's sort of the home of the birthplace of the zombie film. So George Romero and Greg Nicotero and
Mhm.
Tom Savini. Um, and what happened was I would always have summer jobs with my best friend Chad Taylor,
Mhm.
and we worked as parlays one summer. We worked as ice cream truck drivers. We worked as in Blockbuster Video together, and it was the start of a summer. I think, starting film school, but I was looking for a summer job, and we were at a comic book convention, and there was Tom Savini signing his book, and my friend nudged me and he said, "Why don't you ask Tom for a job?" And I went over to his desk, and he was signing this is the actual
Oh
copy
yeah,
of
Grand
Grand
Illusion.
Illusion.
Yeah,
And this is the actual, there he is, autographing it for me.
very
And I
cool.
asked him on this day if he would take on an intern, if he was looking for a unpaid intern. I said the magic word, free intern. And he was like, "Actually, I start a movie in 2 weeks. Why don't you come to the shop and help me organize the shop for 2 weeks before the LA guys arrive?" And that film was Two Evil Eyes, which is an anthology film with George Romero did one story, and Dario Argento,
Yeah.
the crazy Dario Argento, did another story. So it was a full education for that whole summer. I didn't get paid a dime, but Tom made sure I worked on all the mold making, all the casting, and then I even got to go to set and just move things around and see how a set worked.
Wow.
And and then the best education was when the two guys from LA arrived. They were Everett Burrell and John Vulich. John has sadly passed away, but Everett had worked on Aliens, Everett Stan Winston's, and John had worked at Grant Canham's on Lost Boys. So they were working on these guys were just instant heroes to me. And Everett did. He said, the best advice is get to LA, go to Stan Winston's, ask to work for free, and see if they'll let you start out as an intern there and see if that would work. And that's exactly what I did. I drove out from Pittsburgh to Los Angeles, the 5 or 6 day drive, and
Wow.
I went to Stan's. It was just perfect time. John, the supervisor, said, we're actually hiring for Batman Returns. So we'll take you on as an intern. We'll see how you are. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, I did start for free, but then 2 or 3 weeks, they saw that I wasn't a crazy person and I was really into it. And my career started there.
And you've reached that point there, but like what came before that? I know you went to Pennsylvania State University, didn't you, studying film? But then before that, was there like a moment, was it Super 8, was it making films for your family that kind of sparked the imagination?
Yes. My dad owned a Bell and Howell Super 8, and he would bring it on family vacations, and he tasked my older brother and sometimes my younger sister, mostly my older brother and I, Craig and I, would have to make a film, and we'd come up with the story. And usually it was an action film where I was the victim. I was usually getting like shot or thrown in a swimming pool or something. One of the films was called Drown, and that was the plot was me getting in a pool, and it had all the great kids Super 8 things, like a whole driving sequence where my brother's driving, but it's a parked car, but we were trying to frame it. But you saw people walk by in the background and stuff like that. And so yes, we started doing that. There was a brief period before I went to Penn State. I started taking classes in Pittsburgh at a place called Pittsburgh Filmmakers, which offered Super 8 filmmaking classes. And that was also a crash course. The professor was a guy named Brady Lewis, fantastic teacher. And he showed us films. I remember we saw a film called Meshes of the Afternoon, which is an experimental film by Maya Deren. And that film, it's a black and white 1930s film, 30s, 40s film. Incredible, just full of in-camera effects too. And I highly recommend. It's probably on YouTube, but
Yeah, I'll
Meshes
try and
of the
dig that out.
Afternoon. It's a very cool. A lot of music videos, stole from this, I would say, or you'll see a lot of effects, in-camera effects, in this film, and that had a great impact on me too. And then, of course, the films that were pivotal to me were, I would say, Alien, the first Alien, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Alien, I was, I think, 12 or 13, and we snuck in. And when the chest burster scene happened, my friend Chris and I ran out of the theater. We ran up the aisle, and we were out in the lobby, like trying to calm down. And then we were so thrilled, but so terrified at the same time. And then we made it back into the theater like 20 minutes later, and the alien was full grown, and we didn't understand for years what happened. But
How old were you then?
that film had a great. What's that?
How old were you then when you snuck into Alien?
That's 79. So I was like 12 or 13, and they were very strict in Pittsburgh about sneaking in. Like I remember I bought a ticket for Walt Disney's Robin Hood, and then would kind of wait by the water fountain and then like go in and see that. And we got kicked out. I actually saw Creepshow as well, and I was 13, and that one I got caught, and they did the flashlight, and they're like, so I didn't see all of Creepshow for some time either. But those films, and then Raiders, of course. A lot of people say Star Wars, and Star Wars was massive for me, but Raiders, I really fell in love with every aspect of. I wanted to learn about editing, and I loved the stunts, and I loved the effects, the creature, the melted Nazi, the ghosts. So that one I saw a 1,000 times, and that had such an impact on me.
You mentioned editing. of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Were you editing your Super 8 movies like in camera, or was there a point where you had like a splicer at home and you were able to do that?
Yeah, I had this sir. So because the viewfinder was little viewer was so small. But yeah, I cut and did the tape splices. And we also back in high school, I was a big fan of Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings and later Fire and Ice. But my friend in art class and I were big Bakshi fans, and we wanted to do a rotoscope sequence. And we talked our high school art teacher into letting us spend the whole semester trying to rotoscope a sequence of like a wizard climbing a hill and then a dragon was going to come down. And we filmed my friend on a golf course with a robe. And then, we traced all the paper. We did it on paper, but we did a paper test and we had him walking. We never even got to the dragon. We just kind of had him walking in the wind, but it was a blast. It was so much fun to try out rotoscoping and see how that worked.
It is that there is something about that kind of combination between artistry and the technology that's available to you at the time, and also the sort of science behind it all as well. And I think that's what's amazing about the people like you that work on these movies, and like you've made your own short movies as well, is that you're combining all of those elements. Where would you say that you got your biggest education? Was it from Penn State? Was it from Super 8? Was it from Tom Savini? Was it Stan Winston later on?
I think, yeah, Penn State was a great background in making shorts. I did a short film. I was very much into Full Metal Jacket at the time. And I was like, and in Penn State, I had access to a rock quarry. It was amazing. It was like an abandoned rock quarry. And they let us film there. So I had like some Army ROTC volunteers, soldiers that were in their gear and they were running, and we actually did charges that went off, and it was not I don't recommend it, but we did we took black powder, and then we put it in 35 millimeter film containers, and we put these things called electric matches. I shouldn't be recommending any of this, but it's but we had charges, and then they were kind of buried in the dirt, and we kind of remembered where they were, and we had the charges go off. So I definitely got a nice background, a film background at Penn State. And then when I moved but I'd say the greatest education I had was when I landed at Stan's, and I started on Batman Returns, and which led right into Jurassic Park and Interview with a Vampire, and then later Congo and many others. That was the best education, because I was involved in every aspect in getting the dinosaurs from armature to I barely sculpted. I think I just chopped clay and pounded clay onto when you see the footage of like the giant T-Rex, and we're just chopping box after box of clay and hammering it on to, and then the real sculptors, Mike Tursick and Shannon Shea and many others, they would get on there and actually be doing the sculpting. So that was the best education for me.
What was the first job you had then at Stan Winston on Batman Returns?
I arrived, and the very first job was fitting the penguin suits onto the small actors, the small person actors. So remember we had Debbie Carrington, who was an actress. She was in Total Recall. She was the machine gunning.
Yeah.
And she was in many small person roles over the years. And I think we had the old guy Felix, who was cousin It on the Addams Family way back.
Wow.
I think he was in a costume too. And we were just kind of preparing the backpacks and the inner structures that were inside the suits. And then the other job, there was a penguin army of penguin puppets that were, maybe 2 feet high or even larger. I think they were, 3 feet high. And when they were the fur that was stitched down, it looked like a stuffed animal, like very sharp line between the white and the black. And one of the tasks many of us did was we had to.
Okay, so here's one of the points where Kevin's connection dropped out. So I got back in touch with him, and what he said was, quote, We would use dyed white and black chicken feathers to create a softer, naturalistic blend by breaking up or salt and peppering the edge with individual feathers. Okay, back to Kevin chatting now.
So it softened the two colors, and that was it. And then what was happening was, while we were doing Batman Returns, one of the first couple of weeks I was there, I looked over and there was a rolling cart with an object under a big beach towel. And I was like, what is that? And they said, that's our next film. And I went over and I looked under the towel. It was the scale model of the T-Rex that Mike Tursick, the maquette that eventually, became the official maquette for Jurassic Park.
Wow.
So that was really thrilling.
And Jurassic Park, a bit of an odd movie to work on as somebody who's doing practical stuff, because despite the fact there is plenty of practical effects and creature work in that film, of course, this is the real kind of full arrival of the digital world. Was that ever a concern, sort of hovering above you, kind of worried about, is my job going to continue?
I still remember the fateful day, and everybody talks about it in all the documentaries, about the day that they brought the ILM footage and they showed it to us in the display room. And I remember everybody kind of walking back out afterwards. It was like we were the baseball team that lost, that, we were all kind of walking out we were all floored by it. It was so amazing. But at the same time, when we started testing the Rex, and it was, with the telemetry device and it was thrashing around, it was so powerful. And I mean, the whole shop gathered, and, they had to turn on the safety lights because it really was like a big dangerous thing. And we knew it was something special back then. Yeah, it was really a wonderful experience to be there.
Yeah, it feels like there's certain moments in your life where you drop a little flag and say, this is a moment, this is a milestone. That's surely one of those for you. But it looks, looking through your list on IMDb, I'm always intrigued by the sort of slightly more curious titles where, because you see like Cliffhanger, Jurassic Park, Demolition Man, you see Pulp Fiction, and it's like, well, that's interesting because you've worked as a special effects assistant on that, but I can't immediately imagine what that might be. Was that for some of the injury detail and things, or?
There was a really good run at Stan Winston's, and then I got and I should back up for a sec, because I did have, when you were talking about planting the flag, I just had this moment. The big moment for me on set was I only got to puppeteer sort of one moment on Jurassic Park, but myself, a guy named Dave Grasso, Eric Ostroff, 3 or 4 of us were all crammed inside that podium for the scene where the baby T-Rex hatches out of the egg.
Cool.
And so we were, it was so wild because we were on headsets and we're hearing Steven Spielberg like start to, tell Stan, and Stan was on the headset next to it, Steven. So we hear Steven through Stan's headset, and then Stan is kind of whispering when we should be cracking through the egg. And then we hear Jeff Goldblum right above us. We're like right underneath that tower. And, he would say, life finds a way. And we had to be like out of the eggshell by the time he says life will find a way. And so it was really one of those surreal moments where, I can look back and think that was a weird place to be, on the soundstage, getting direction from both Stan and Spielberg, and it was pretty wonderful.
That's a great scene. No, that's fine. I want to carry on talking about this now, because that's a kind of iconic scene, and it's one that people can immediately recall if they've seen Jurassic Park just the one time, and it's one of those points where I think as a viewer back then, I was thinking, is that practical? Well, probably the first time I watched it, I wasn't even thinking that, but the 5th time I was watching, I was thinking, is that practical? Is that CGI? And to think that all you guys and girls are crammed in that podium kind of working away, it reminds me of our friend Dave Barkley inside Jabba the Hutt, or below, Yoda, kind of with all the other puppeteers kind of working away. Such a cool scene. And one of the things I'm curious about is, okay, you've helped, build some of this stuff, you've put it together. is it therefore the best route to take to have you guys puppeteer it as well, rather than bringing in a performance artist or a puppeteer that has experience? Is it better to have the people that were kind of involved in the creation of it there?
I think it could go either way. I think it's definitely the builders have had their hands on this puppet for so long that they really know its movements and everything. That being said, I also know brilliant puppeteers out here who can take an inanimate object and really bring it to life in a way that's astounding. Like they really, my friend Ron Binion, who is sort of the lead puppeteer on all my projects, also a guy named Eli Presser. They're both so insanely talented with really bringing a puppet to life, really knowing exactly the eye lines. Like even though it's a very static figure, like they're making the rib cage rise, and you're like, that's a fiberglass rib. How are they doing that? And all the neck movements, and like I've built it, so I know it only does like an XY axis, but they add so many little nuances to it. So it's I'd say it can go either way.
Yeah. Jumping back then to Pulp Fiction, what were the shots you worked on during that movie?
So I was, after Stands, there was sort of a period of time where I was jumping from shop to shop to shop. So I was at Amalgamated Dynamics and I was at K&B Effects, and K&B would get like 3 movies at once. So I think while we were doing In the Mouth of Madness, which was the John Carpenter film, we also did Pulp Fiction, but I was involved on the Phil Lamar, the African-American guy who gets shot in the back seat accidentally.
Yeah, right.
I forget his character name, but
yeah.
We made a dummy, and I seamed the dummy, and I think that was my only task. And so as I worked at more shops, I really started getting pigeonholed, like in a good way, to be a seamer. So foam seaming and silicone seaming and hiding. So there's a whole art to it. A lot of people hate it, and but I really enjoyed. And in England, it's called scumbling, where you hide the seam. You're whipping up the foam. You burn down the edges, and then you're taking the foam material, the same material the skin is made out of, and you're doing a pass over to hide the seam. And there's an art to it because you don't want it to be too hot. You can't have it raise up like a speed bump, and you don't want it to sink down or it'll read. So there's a whole art to doing that. And I really enjoyed it. It's very zen. And I did many movies over the years as a seamer, and I really enjoyed it. But then I wanted to start getting back into model building and things like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed seaming for many, many years.
That's a job I had no idea about. I didn't realize there was somebody who specialized in that, but it's very niche, I'm sure. But to be known as the guy that can do that for us and make sure that it isn't, like you say, like a speed bump or like a dip, and that effect is pretty convincing in that movie. I'm sort of reimagining it now or remembering it now.
Yeah, that was one of those. Some of those films we would be doing like the 3 movies at the shop at the same time. So I'd be like jumping from that movie to Wyatt Earp to Mouth of Madness. So they were quite a blur. Like especially at Stands, you would get one movie and you'd be on that movie for 6-8 months, or even Jurassic was like a year. But you'd just be on one movie, and then as the years go by, all of a sudden you're on 2 movies at once, or 3 movies at once, or 2 movies and a commercial all at once. So it kind of has condensed over the years, and the giant epic long movies, they don't seem to happen as often.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that the title of your job changes over the years, as well as it does with many people's careers. Obviously, I've spoken to a lot of VFX artists who might start off in a very tiny area and then they end up being a supervisor. I noticed one of the first films I could see that you worked as a key effects artist. which I guess is a step up, is one of the favorites of mine, which is Galaxy Quest, which I watched again recently.
Yeah.
What was it like working on that movie?
That was wonderful. That was I worked on the Thermian. I actually was able to sculpt on the tentacles, which was a great opportunity. Stan was very generous, and he really wanted to see his employees kind of flourish. And if you stated your case, he would give you a shot to do something. So I think I pushed to be a little more involved, and I was kind of doing backup sculpting. There were the lead sculptors, and then I was sculpting little, the massive tentacles down below. So it'd be a group of us. And then the big moment on set was I puppeteered on the inside out pig lizard, like when it gets beamed up and then it's kind of shooting all sorts of fluorescent dyed fluid. So we really pushed the limit. That was the trouble. I remember it was very super fluorescent, and it was like a nightmare. Like the costume people were like freaking out because the stuff, we wanted it dyed as like brightly fluorescent as possible. So we were using these very fluorescent dyes. And I remember it was kind of randomly shooting everywhere. And they were concerned that we were, they had to quickly, clean off the dyes. But
right.
it was a lot of fun. Really a great time.
I always think that movie kind of stands alone in a way because it manages to be science fiction, create characters that you love who are kind of related to, of course, to the Star Trek cast that came before, but it manages to be serious and funny at the same time, and you care for the characters despite them being in these comedic situations. I'm totally invested in the movie as I'm watching it. Is that when you work on a film like that, as opposed to a film that is kind of like raw horror or action, are you having to sort of understand those comedic kind of sensibilities, do you think? Because most of the time you're trying to avoid them, right? You're trying to avoid this thing from looking funny.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm reminded that so Crash McCreary was the concept artist, and I remember he was showing me he did a whole series of Alan Rickman, possible concepts of his final look, and they were ridiculous. I think he had one concept, and Crash could laugh so easy and fall over. He would fall on the ground laughing. It was you could get him to laugh very easy, and he would physically fall on the ground and be laughing. And he showed a concept of Alan Rickman, and he wanted something like either on his chin or his nose to constantly be wiggling. And they opted not to do it, but they thought, oh, maybe have something so every shot when he's talking, something is, ridiculous happening. So, the comedy stuff, I guess, we're just so concerned with, is the fluid pumping through and doing the right stuff at the right time? I think that's we come at it with this serious angle, and hopefully the comedy will play off from there.
One of the other big films that I think looks certainly like a big step in your career is working on King Kong. What was the inspiration to try and get into Weta? Was it Lord of the Rings?
It was. I everybody had heard that Gino Acevedo made the Lord of the Rings. I worked with him on Demolition Man and Wolf, and then I didn't see him for many years. I know he went off and worked on Godzilla and maybe Species and Independence Day, and then he got the call to go work over there. So he went over, and then I met Richard. How did this work out? So I saw Fellowship of the Ring, and it floored me, and I was like, I got to get over there. I got to figure out. I want to work on the other films. And I reached out to Gino, and he said, we actually filmed all three. So we don't have the work right now. Then I was kind of sad, but I kept working, and I was at Spectral Motion on Hellboy at that point. And Richard Taylor came out to Comic-Con, and he comes out to Comic-Con and is the most generous guy on the planet. And I caught up with him and, you know, kind of stated my case that I would love to come work for him. And when I had heard about King Kong, I reached out to Gino again, and Gino said, now is the time, you know, try to reach out. And I got in touch with Richard, and Richard said, well, we can't pay for you to come over. There's a job for you here, but, you know, you have to pay your own way to get here, and, you know, you have to find your own place and everything, but there's a job waiting for you. So I got out there, and Richard, being the kind of boss he is, he was like, well, what do you want to do? What do you know, what, and I said, I'd really love to do models, because I was starting to really do some model work at a place called New Deal Studio. And he said, well, do you want to work on the Venture boat, or do you want to work on crypts and caves? And I was like, crypts and caves. And so I got to work a lot on, we went out into, actually down to the beaches, and we took castings off the rocks. They did this for Lord of the Rings, so we were kind of just doing a repeat of finding different rock patterns, doing a mold like actually on the rock on the beach, and then bringing it back, and then making hundreds of these foam rock versions. And then you kind of cut them apart with like a fishing knife, and, you know, kludge them together with foam into these giant formations. And I was working again with Alan Lee, was the concept illustrator, and he would come down and he would be drawing. I worked on the Kong gate, the gates. That was one of the first tasks, and the staircases. And Alan Lee, who's a brilliant illustrator, he did the Fairies book with Brian Froud, and he is this very soft-spoken guy, and he worked on all the movies, and he was doing all the concept art at the same time. So we were kind of working shoulder to shoulder, and he was so it was another, you know, touchstone moment for me.
And when did you get the kind of idea or the bug to go back to your roots as you know, in a way, to make these short movies that I've really enjoyed watching, I have to say. We'll talk about each of them in turn, but what gave you that kind of inspiration to go back and make movies again yourself?
Thanks so much. That really means a lot. I about 2009, I had heard about a film grant that Heather Henson, who's Jim Henson's youngest daughter, offered to filmmakers for a puppet film. And what I did, I was working at Amalgamated Dynamics at the time, and I, in my spare time, I made about a 25-inch, maybe 30-inch tall figure, and he was kind of a Christopher Lloyd-looking Victorian figure. And what I did is, put him together, and then we shot like a little 2-minute concept of him kind of like lurking around, going down some hallways with a lantern, and, you know, very Hammer-esque, you know, cobwebs and a kind of Hammer lighting, Mario Bava lighting. And I mailed that off to Heather, and I got approved for the grant. So I was off to the races, and got awarded a grant from her, and shot that, and then that became the narrative of Victor Karloch. And then from there, I started looking into Kickstarter for the next 2 films.
You said that you created this character that looked like Christopher Lloyd, but you got Christopher Lloyd involved as well. How did that come about?
I did. So at the same time, like right before I was right before this puppet grant, I was listening to a lot of old time radio, sort of like ghost stories. And I thought, I'll do a radio play. That would be a lot of fun to do. And I heard about a charity that was a Halloween charity here in Los Angeles for sight impaired kids, and it was like a Halloween event that catered to blind or near blind people to kind of enjoy Halloween festivities. And I thought, how about if they come in a theater and sit down and they hear this very sense around ghost story that's not too terrifying, and also maybe we can do something with scent, and we can have scent technology kind of come out at different times. And so I approached, I thought, I'll go for gold and try to reach out to Christopher Lloyd. And I spoke to his manager, and she thought it was a real idea. And he got immediately back to me. And he was like, I'll do it. And we recorded him, and it was fantastic. And that was sort of the first version of the Victor Karloch character. And so I, just previous, and that was sort of like 6 months before the Heather Henson grant. So I kind of had this character on the back burner. And then when I got the grant, I contacted him again, and I was like, I have another project. It's not a charity, but would Christopher consider it? And he was so easygoing. He was just he was like, let's do it. And he came down, and then I'll jump way ahead to Haunted Swordsman. I was just promoting. He came in for a life cast at Spectral for another project that was shooting in Spain. But I connected with him again. And I said, I'm actually going to do a samurai movie. And do you mind saying like a word that, can I record you just helping to promote it? And then he was like, well, can I be in it? And then I wasn't even expecting him to want to be in it, but he ended up playing a character in that one too. So he was so wonderful to work with, and he came to the festival. I played in Santa Barbara, which is like his hometown.
Yeah.
So he came to the film there, and he's just such a sweet guy.
Very cool. And you got Elijah Wood in that for the narrative of Victor Karloch as well. He's got a very distinctive voice, and
yes,
carries quite a chunk of that film. How did that come about? Was that another moment of serendipity?
Yeah, that was a connection through Weta, because he came down and visited Wellington during King Kong.
Right.
And he kind of went out with the group of us. And then at Comic-Con again, I saw him again at Comic-Con, and we were all going out for a beer, and I mentioned that I was starting this puppet film and I'd love to talk to him about it. And I think it's very painless, because it really is only, we can kind of do the recording in an hour or less. I mean, it's a very painless recording, and he was definitely on board to do that. And he was a joy to work with as well.
Puppeteering is a kind of, I was trying to think of a way to describe it. It's not quite live action. It's not animation. It's somewhere in between. It's performance art. But I always find there's something quite haunting and quite uncanny about puppet work. I remember being a kid, and this puppet troupe kind of visited my school, and there were these Muppet-like characters. And I remember the kids just falling about laughing with this like big-breasted woman jumping on a bed, and her boobs are flying everywhere. Just how instantly you connect with these characters, and I think your films do that really well. And I mentioned the word haunting, and your movies, of course, have that horror aspect to them. There's even a character in the Miller Calder's End that immediately recalls Peter Cushing to me. Those Hammer movies that I was so terrified of as a kid, and I'm a bit of a horror agnostic, let's say. It's the horror's not a genre that I will pick when I've got a free couple of hours, but I still find it super intriguing to watch those. What is it about puppeteering that kind of attracts you so much?
I think it's all the things that you're talking about. I do think when it's there is an uncanniness that is and there's such a magic to when it works so well, when you're actually rolling the camera and the character comes into the shot and does something, and it catches us, even the cameraman, off guard, like how well we did it. And it could take 5 takes, it could take 15 takes, but when it hits, it's so amazing. And yeah, all of us, you even though it's an inanimate object and expressions are fixed, they're like it's like a hard resin figure. You kind of instantly apply, did it change expression? Did it do something? You kind of read into it. And just the use of lighting, Ben Surf, my cinematographer, he is amazing at kind of capturing the light so that we are really adding all these facets to a character that's really inanimate. And then getting back, you mentioned about it's not quite animation, and we were talking about recording actors. And the one technique I was doing was I would record all the actors, cut it together like a radio play beforehand, so that the timing seemed accurate, and then we would do the playback on stage. So if they come in to a shot, they're listening to the dialogue, and they're reacting to, even if it's a voiceover, they're kind of responding to what the character is thinking. So,
and are they repeating that sort of verbatim as well to make sure? Well, you don't always have lip sync in your movies, do you? Some of the characters, their mouths don't move, but if somebody's puppeteering and they've got a guide track, or the track that's going to be used in the final film from Christopher Lloyd or Elijah Wood, are they kind of saying that back to themselves as the take is being recorded?
Yeah. It's really interesting about the voice sync, because the first film, Narrative of Victor Karloch, in my head, I treated it like a theatrical piece, and I had never had any intention for any mouth movement. And if you saw a puppeteer, that was fine. I thought, we're just really watching the performance of the puppet and not getting, not wrapped up in the lip sync. And I received a lot of criticism that the mouths didn't move. And it kept me out of some film festivals. They said, oh, we really liked the look of the film, but it was disconcerting that the characters their mouths didn't move. So with future films, I kind of leaned on, I was going to have mostly narration and a few lines of dialogue that we would CG the jaw movement for, or all the way into the third film in Haunted Swordsman, I had an animatronic head that we would cut to, and that could really emote and would have brow and jaw movement, eye movement, everything like that. And so it was really this, it was this learning process for me of like what works for the puppets. Like, they work great if it's just narration, but if there is dialogue and you're staring at a static doll head, people kind of tune out a bit, or it's a tougher hurdle.
The word
for some people.
You said that person had mentioned it was disconcerting, and in a way, it kind of, in that film, it adds to the kind of disconcerting nature of the film for me. It was kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And I have to say, the first one I saw, when I think we first connected about this time 2 years ago, was The Haunted Swordsman. And I genuinely didn't know what I was looking at for the first 2 minutes. I thought, is this CG? Is this CG? Is this live action? What? And then like 2 or 3 minutes in, I was like, it's a puppet. I didn't realize that, I had no idea. And then I was completely drawn into the movie because, like you say, what you've managed to achieve with the atmospherics, the lighting, the characterization, I think is phenomenal, really. Because I know these are small budget things, but like you say, even if, like, obviously the samurai, the main character, is a great subject to choose because he's stoic and he's got that furrowed brow kind of thing, and you do think he's changing his face as he's moving and whatnot. There are a couple of moments, of course, where he's in pain and you see like his teeth and things.
Yeah, but I have that character right here. This is
wow.
So here he is. Hold on.
We'll describe this for people just listening to the podcast as well. So Kevin's got a head in his hands of the samurai just kind of clenching his teeth together in pain. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is sort of the attack head. So this was only used for about maybe 3 shots for the whole film, and it's just either him leaping or getting thrown against, when he gets thrown against the wall by the giant. This is it. And Lynn Watson makes these beautiful handmade wigs that are great. So
and who's did the head, the face? Is that your work?
No, that's my really great friend Arjen Touten. He's a Dutch sculptor, and we both worked at Stan Winston's. I met him on Time Machine, and he's gone on to do Oscar nominated. He did Wonder, the makeup for Wonder.
Oh yeah.
He's worked on Maleficent, and he did the first Ghostbusters Afterlife, and now he's on the current Ghostbusters. So
nice.
He and I have been friends forever, and he's sort of the go-to sculptor for the main characters. So and on the very new film that I'm doing, the Icelandic one, he did the main character as well. So
there is something about that swordsman's face that is just so, I don't know, it really draws you in, even though, like you say, it's got no expression other than the fixed expression and that occasional change. I was totally drawn in, and that's what kind of tricked me when I was first watching it, because I think the sound work, the music, the score that you have, the atmospherics, the smoke and the lighting, the cinematography and everything, it looks, I thought, is this the first episode of a show or something? And I have to say, by the time we reached the end of that film, The Haunted Swordsman, I was looking for episode 2. It was a series that I wanted to see.
That's the big criticism, is that it just ends, but I ran out of money, so I had to stop, and that was it. But
it's a compliment rather than a criticism, I have to say.
Oh yeah, no, I thank you so much. And it was going on early on. We Tab Murphy, who's the writer I worked with on the project, he and I just thought, okay, we'll just not have the samurai say much, and we'll have the severed head do all the talking. And so he was perfect, and he's sort of the wisecracking severed head. So that was a great use of an animatronic head to do all the expressions and talking, and then you just cut to the very stoic samurai.
So tell me about the new one then, the Kickstarter that you're about to launch, and we're going to sync this episode so it gets out to all my listeners so that they can check out your Kickstarter. Tell me about that project and what it's about and what you hope for.
Fantastic. Yes. So the new one, it has a tricky title, but it's called Grylu Sker, and it's Icelandic word, and it basically means the witch's island. Gryla is a very legendary, famous witch of Icelandic folklore, and we're doing sort of a reimagining of that witch's origin story, and along with it, packed into a survival story. So it's a lost explorer shipwrecked on a uncharted island and encounters strange supernatural stuff. And so that was, we kept it very basic and simple at first. And I worked with Tab Murphy again. I met Tab we have a mutual friend, John Stark, and John brought Tab to a screening of Mill at Caulder's End when I had my...
Again, the connection dropped here. Kevin was saying, quote, "When I had my premiere screening of The Mill at Caulder's End on the Jim Henson lot, screenwriter Tab Murphy approached me to ask if I was going to make another puppet film because he would love to work with me." Back to Kevin.
And Tab wrote Gorillas in this, and among Disney films. And so he's a very seasoned writer, and he loves samurai movies. So we did Haunted Swordsman together. And then I said, I want to do this explorer film next and set it in somewhere in the Arctic Sea near Iceland. And we both love adventure movies like Revenant and Jeremiah Johnson, and even like the Mad Max, like Fury Road, all these kind of movies. And so we wrote sort of a rough script. At the same time at work, we were working with a music video director on a possible feature that's still in development and will happen down the road. But he works with Bjork a lot on her music videos. And I told him he was also a fan of Swordsman, and he said, "Well, I'll probably get you in touch with a few Icelandic people if you want to talk to people." And actually, I had just seen The Northman, and I wanted to reach out to Sjón, who is the co-writer, and he's very well known, a giant literary person in Iceland, and he also is a lyricist. He wrote a few of my favorite Bjork songs, and he wrote The Northman with Robert Eggers. And so we showed him Swordsman. He loved it, and then he agreed to kind of come on board as sort of a co-author. We basically sent our draft to him to really make it a true Icelandic story. So that was Sjón brought in all of his folklore ideas, and we kind of created the story from there. So that's, in a nutshell, that's sort of how Grylu Sker came about. And it has supernatural elements, it has a lot of effects, and it has amazing puppetry again. And we went out and we shot a test of the explorer character just a few weeks ago, and that we're just cutting that together for the Kickstarter, just to show a little proof of concept of what it looks like. I wanted to talk about, after Haunted Swordsman, I thought maybe I should really start thinking about changing up the way I approach the look of the puppet. And I started going down the road of maybe I should really mechanize the face a little more and do a foam skin. So this is sort of the explorer head. Bring it in.
You have to describe it a bit as well, Kevin, because people might be just listening as well to the podcast.
So this is a fiberglass underskull that has there's servos inside, and so it has a servo jaw, and then it would have servo eyebrows. I wasn't going to bother with eye blinks. I was just going to do brows that could either be like sympathetic or like determined. And I started going down this route, and I started doing test foam skins, and I was just not happy. It suddenly did not look like it didn't look like the original puppets that I created. So this is the explorer character. This is terrible for podcasts, but
so I'll describe. There's a hooded character with a beard. He looks like an intrepid explorer. He's got a long beard, kind of down to the top of his torso, and kind of wispy beard. It's very cool.
He's got cool fingerless gloves. So I went back, when I started doing these foam skin tests and even silicone skin tests, I wasn't happy. It didn't have the look that I fell in love with on Swordsman, where they're hard resin. And even though we know they're a doll, there's something about the look of this, the way they're painted and the look of them that I was really happy with, and I didn't want to like suddenly jinx the whole look of them and change that. So the good thing about this one is I can still have jaw movement because both have dense beards, so I'm able to actually cut a lower jaw, almost like a ventriloquist jaw, and have the lower jaw move under the beard, because basically all the discussion will be, the beard kind of moving.
Nice.
And hopefully that'll all be hidden. So I lucked out on this movie because everybody has big beards.
You'll have to stick to only bearded movies. No, that's great, because all you need is
everybody has to have a beard.
Yeah, you need a suggestion, don't you, of movement, and then you buy into it as a viewer, I think. Yeah. I mean, look, George Lucas managed to make Sy Snootles sing a song for Return of the Jedi with just, what is it he says in that documentary? Open and close, I think, something like that.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. And with the advent of more 3D printing, I'm able to actually I can scan the heads now, and I can do alternate prints of the heads with different expressions that we can manually change in the computer. So we can grab the eyebrows and do a different expression and then print that head and paint that head. So so there'll be a lot of that, like swapping out heads, which I didn't have on Haunted Swordsman. Like the technology has, since like 2018, 2019, now I really have the ability to print faster and better heads with different expressions.
And what's the target, and what's the kind of length of time you're going to have the Kickstarter running for?
It runs for 33 days. And it is it's kind of ending, it's kind of coinciding with San Diego Comic-Con. So I'm hoping that some of that audience might catch attention before it closes. It's going to be another 15-minute film, 15 to under 20. I think I'll do 2 cuts of it. I think I'll do kind of festivals love a 15-minute or shorter film. They love a 7-minute film. But if you're submitting to festivals, 15, it better be like really work for 15. Any more festivals start to not want to take on a 25-minute long film. So in my head, I'm going to aim for a 15-minute film, but also make an extended cut that will probably be part of the Kickstarter, like some extended scenes or some additional scenes that I could have on the Blu-ray, but not for the festival cut.
Mm-hmm. And what's the kind of end game for you with these short films? Is there a hope that one day you'll be able to make a feature, or is it just you just love the process of making these movies, these short movies?
I love the process so much that I had many meetings with Haunted Swordsman and many Zooms. It kind of came out right at pandemic, so unfortunately the world tour that I was about to have, I was going to go to Amsterdam and Brussels and all these places, and it all became Zooms. And then I did take a lot of Zoom meetings with companies like Bad Robot and Legendary and many places, and they all enjoyed Haunted Swordsman, but there didn't seem to be a place for it to, they weren't taking that show on. So for me, it's just the joy of like making another one. And I was going to come back to Swordsman, but during the pandemic, I started thinking about this explorer story and like a different tone. I think this one will be a little more dreamlike, a little more existential as a lost explorer. I love those stories, kind of, a little more Bergman and Tarkovsky and those kind of filmmakers, rather than Swordsman. I think of as more of a straight action film. So I kind of wanted to do a little more dreamlike. He's beat up early in the film by a sail mast hits him in the head, and he's kind of recovering from that and washes up on this beach. So his vision's bad, and he's kind of seeing these things. And I'm really thrilled because Gino Acevedo is contributing concept art and to a creature that Phil Tippett will be animating. So Phil contacted me. I sent him Haunted Swordsman, and I told him I loved Mad God, and then he wrote me back and said, "When can we work together?" And I was so floored.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. And so basically, I have to deliver a finished stop motion puppet up to him and the set pieces, and then leave it in his capable hands, and we'll go from there. But that's just a dream come true for me. That's like, if the film doesn't do any business at all, like just to go work with Phil on a stop motion shot would be a dream. So I'm over the moon about that, and trying to give him something that I had 2 moments that were a possible stop motion moment. And when I told him the 2, he was like, "Oh, let's go with the weird creature one," because the other one was like a stunt kind of thing. And he was like, no, let's do the creature. So I'm over the moon about that, and I will keep everyone posted on the progress of that puppet as it gets built.
As a final question then, Kevin, where can people see your stuff? Where can they find you on social media, etc.? Because I'm sure already there's plenty of people typing in your name on Google listening to this.
Well, my website is thespiritcabinet.com. But I think during the Kickstarter, if you go to kickstarter.com and you type in Grylu Sker, which is Grylu and Sker, Sker. I know I chose the top, but I wanted to choose a true Icelandic name. And when I tell this to an Icelandic person, their eyes light up and they're like, oh, that's really cool. So I feel like I'm doing Iceland justice if I give it the proper title. We'll see if people just say, "Oh, what's that Icelandic ghost story puppet film?" They'll probably find it that way too. But
yeah,
it's Grylu Sker, and Peter Stormare has already recorded a voice for it, and I'm hoping to. There's another actor that's very interested, but I can't announce it yet. But it will be very exciting.
Well, listen, Kevin, it's been so good to finally talk to you. We've been trying to do this for a couple of years now, and
I know.
And you know what? I think your films are fantastic. You know, the work you've done in the movies that I love, I appreciate, and you know, I think is amazing. What a career you've had so far, and so much more to come. But these short films, they really do spark something in me that's kind of nostalgic, and that, you know, I'm so looking forward to the new one. And I'm going to make sure that all those links are in the show notes, so that people can find them. And yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, well, thank you, Jamie, so much. And your podcasts are my favorite. I love listening to all of them and talk about getting that nostalgic buzz. I just love hearing all these stories, and yeah, it really keeps me going.
Thanks, man. Well, that's amazing. Well, if there's anything I can feed back to you and, you know, people that are creative like you, then I'm very, very happy about that. Thanks so much, man.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my chat there with Kevin McTurk. Thanks so much to Kevin for his time. He is a good egg, this guy, and I think we're going to be friends for a while. We have very similar interests in movies, and hoping to catch up with him for dinner next time we're in the States for our ongoing Joe Alves documentary, which is still happening. Paddy and I are still chipping away. It's just trying to fit it in these busy periods of work for us is very, very difficult, but hopefully we'll get more done on the project in the coming months. So a quick reminder before we talk about the next episode, do check out Kevin McTurk's Kickstarter, Grylu Sker. That's Grylusker. Or if you just type in Kevin McTurk Kickstarter, it does come up on via Google, and it will take you to the Kickstarter page for that project. Do support it if you can. It's really important to support artists like this, making this wonderful stuff. And, you know, you can get some goodies along the way as well if you support that project. Next up on the podcast, the first episode of August 2023, will be my conversation with long-term Spielberg collaborator, visual effects supervisor Pablo Hellman. Quite a coup for this podcast, another high-profile artist whose work I very much admire. That was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting that out to you. Please support the podcast if you can on patreon.com/Jamie Benning. I know everyone is tightening their belts at the moment, and that goes for me too. Our mortgage is about to double, the car needs replacing. Because of the low emission zone here in London, it's going to be an expensive year. So anything you can do to help keep this podcast going would be gratefully received. Without your support, I'm not going to be able to continue. So your support is really, really important to me. If you haven't already checked out the new book, Return of the Jedi, The Unauthorized Timeline by myself and my friend Justin Berger, then please go to JediTimeline.com. If you love Star Wars movies and you love details, then this is the book for you. It catalogues the entire production history of the film, as well as the aftermath of its release, all the way up to the 40th anniversary. So it includes things about the pre-production, the production, the post-production, the toys, the games, the video games, home video releases. I mean, just crazy stuff. An Ewok court case. Yeah, I know. You need this book in your collection. It is currently on Amazon, but if you check on JediTimeline.com, you'll be directed to the site that is relevant for your territory. Thanks for joining me for this episode, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentaries podcast.